The radar screen erupts, dozens of high-speed contacts closing fast from multiple directions. It's 3:12 a.m. in the Strait of Hormuz, and the crew of an American destroyer has exactly 90 seconds before those Iranian speedboats reach rocket range. This isn't a drill. This is the moment Iran decided to turn the world's most critical oil choke point into their personal toll booth, and the United States Navy is about to send them a bill written in precision-guided munitions. What you're about to hear is how a 2-hour firefight in complete darkness redrew the balance of power in the Middle East, because Iran didn't just attack a ship, they shattered their own master plan. Here's what led to this moment. After every diplomatic channel between Washington and Tehran slammed shut, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps stopped making threats and started making demands. Protection fees for oil tankers, submit or sink. They called it Operation Hormuz Gatekeeper, and their plan was simple: seize absolute control over the 33-kilometer wide strait that carries 21 million barrels of oil every single day, turn it into a missile-backed toll booth that would hold the global economy hostage. The problem with their plan was standing right in front of them, a $2 billion piece of American engineering called an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, bristling with sensors and weapons designed for exactly this kind of fight, and it wasn't operating blind. 8,000 meters above the chaos, a Boeing P-8A Poseidon had been painting the battlefield in real time, watching Iranian mobile missile launchers roll out of their caves, tracking every speedboat the moment it left port. When the Revolutionary Guard Corps launched their swarm attack, they thought they were springing a trap. They had no idea they were walking into one. At 3:30 a.m., the digital chess match began. The Poseidon crew deployed sonar buoys originally designed for hunting submarines, now recalibrated to detect the acoustic signatures of Iranian speedboat engines cutting through the waves. Within minutes, they built a real-time digital map pinpointing every vessel's location. The data got encrypted and transmitted to the fleet via Link 16, a network that turns isolated platforms into a synchronized kill chain. The first blood came 5 minutes later. An MH-60R Seahawk helicopter, flying 8 kilometers out beyond the range of Iranian machine guns, locked onto the command vessels using its multispectral targeting system. 2 Hellfire missiles streaked through the night, laser-guided and relentless. They vaporized the lead boats in blazes of fire and shrapnel. The Revolutionary Guard formation faltered. Without command and control, coordination became chaos. But Iran had prepared for this moment. From coastal caves, they launched hundreds of Ababil decoy drones, cheap expendable platforms designed to saturate radar screens. On the destroyer's radar, 50 targets suddenly multiplied into 500 flickering blips. At the same time, Fajr 5 rocket launchers positioned on coastal cliffs unleashed a barrage into the water, creating massive 15-meter water columns around the destroyer. A tactical smokescreen of salt spray and steam designed to blind infrared sensors and force the American crew to fight in a sea of interference. This is where Iran's plans started falling apart. They assumed overwhelming the destroyer's sensors would create paralysis. Instead, it triggered what the Navy calls counter-battery fire. Using coordinates fed from the Poseidon, the destroyer's Mark 41 vertical launch system fired precision-guided missiles that arced through the sky and obliterated the threatening launchers the moment they appeared on radar. Simultaneously, the ship's electronic warfare system emitted concentrated energy beams that overwhelmed Iranian coastal radar receivers, creating a temporary blind spot along the coastline. At 3:50 a.m., a pair of A-10 Thunderbolts scrambled from forward operating bases. Unlike supersonic fighters, these warhogs can maintain steady flight at 300 knots while hunting individual targets with patience and precision. They exploited the electronic warfare gap, weaving through limestone cliffs to stay below radar detection, then suddenly appearing at just 30 meters altitude with their wings nearly slicing through the waves. The sky blazed with tracer rounds and flares as American pilots executed 7G turns just above the water surface, blood rushing to their feet, vision narrowing, all to evade suicide drones frantically charging toward their air intakes. They dropped chains of magnesium decoys burning at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, creating blinding flashes that reflected off the Black Sea. When the formation stabilized, the GAU-8 Avenger cannons let loose. 65 30mm depleted uranium rounds per second tore through the speedboat fleet, turning it into a graveyard of flaming debris and oil slicks. But Iran had one more card to play, and this one nearly worked. At 4:10 a.m., the Seahawk's radar picked up faint metallic signals just inches above the churning water. These weren't waves. They were Iranian Mohajem smart mines, sophisticated explosive devices anchored to the seabed designed to detonate via acoustic triggers. The pilot's voice crackled over secure communications at emergency priority. The destroyer executed a hard starboard turn, its 9,000-ton hull groaning under the strain as it narrowly avoided a cluster of mines that could have ripped the ship apart. This was Iran's final tactical trap. The destroyer found itself caught between mines on the seabed and suicide boats closing fast. Move to evade the boats and risk hitting a mine. Stay put to sweep for mines and become a sitting duck. The crew had seconds to decide between being slowly sunk or blown up instantly. The Revolutionary Guard Corps thought this pincer movement would force surrender. Instead, it triggered the nuclear option of electronic warfare. The destroyer focused an extremely powerful radio frequency energy beam across the strait. The effect was immediate. The remaining decoy drones, having lost GPS signals and command links, began falling from the sky like dead birds. The suicide boat swarm lost cohesion. Without central coordination, speedboats began colliding with one another in the darkness. Their pilots blinded as navigation screens displayed nothing but static. As the electronic fog cleared, the ship's defensive perimeter contracted for the final steel rain. The Phalanx close-in weapon system, nicknamed Hot-Tempered R2-D2 by the crew, locked onto any object moving faster than 20 knots within a 1.5-mile radius. Its Gatling guns spat tungsten armor-piercing rounds at 4,500 rounds per minute, while the 5-inch naval gun fired airburst rounds programmed to detonate 3 meters above the water surface, creating deadly cones of shrapnel that swept away the last remaining speedboats. By 4:45 a.m., the nature of the battle shifted from desperate defense to systematic retaliation. The destroyer was no longer prey. It had become the hunter. The Poseidon used its radar to pinpoint hidden missile silos and submarine bunkers carved deep into limestone cliffs on Queshim Island. The coordinates were transmitted to the returning Warthogs, now carrying GBU-12 Payway laser-guided bombs. The bombs struck cave entrances with absolute precision, triggering secondary explosions from fuel and ammunition depots, collapsing the Revolutionary Guard's secret bunkers, and burying reserve forces under thousands of tons of rock. At 5 a.m., the blockade was shattered. The Arleigh Burke advanced into the main shipping lane, asserting absolute control over the strait. Tehran's Operation Hormuz gatekeeper had been systematically dismantled in less than 2 hours. Here's the strategic lesson that will reshape Middle Eastern geopolitics for the next decade. If Iran had chosen stealth over aggression, relying solely on secretly laying mines and avoiding direct confrontation, they might have forced the United States into a grueling weeks-long minesweeping operation that would have stalled the global economy through uncertainty alone. But by launching that swarm attack, they walked straight into a Pentagon trap. They gave the Navy clear targets and justification to turn the strait into a live-fire range. Iran didn't just lose a naval battle, they lost their most powerful geopolitical asset. The ability to credibly threaten the world's oil supply disappeared in a single night of tactical miscalculation. The strait remains open, the oil keeps flowing, and somewhere in Tehran, military planners are trying to explain to the supreme leader how their master plan for regional dominance ended in humiliating defeat before the sun came up. The question isn't whether Iran will try this again. It's whether they learn that threatening America's economic lifelines is the fastest way to discover just how much firepower the Navy keeps in reserve.